For many years, Christy McNicholas was absolutely everywhere. She was that familiar face millions of kids grew up watching. The rare young actress who could make you burst out laughing one moment and have tears streaming down your face the next. Then, just as fast as her star had risen, she vanished. No tearful goodbye tours, no explosive tell-all interviews, no final bow on a talk show couch. She simply slipped away from a world that had once worshipped her. Now, after decades of silence, we finally know the full story. And this is the real truth about what happened to Christy McNicholas. Some Hollywood child star journeys shine so brightly, rise so quickly, and seem so pure that you almost know from the start they can't possibly last forever. Christy McNicholas's early career was exactly that kind of dazzling, fragile arc long before she became the girl an entire country fell head over heels for, before she turned into the emotional anchor for a whole generation of television viewers. She was just a regular little kid growing up in Los Angeles with a single mom who was doing everything humanly possible to keep food on the table for 3 children. Christy spent her earliest years watching her Big Brother Jimmy Land commercials and tiny acting gigs. Like countless little sisters before her, she tagged along and jumped right into the same world. Her childhood wasn't some fairy tale ride to fame carefully orchestrated by managers and agents. It was survival. It was real, hard, daily work. Their mom was raising the family alone, and show business became the only reliable paycheck. Christy herself would later laugh, a little sadly, that she never really got to have a proper childhood. Her days were school straight to auditions, auditions straight to set straight home with new pages of dialogue to memorize before collapsing into bed. Yet somehow, beneath all that relentless pressure, something extraordinary was growing inside her. Raw talent and an almost frightening level of emotional depth for someone so young. What struck everyone who met her, even as a child, was how completely authentic she was. No fake polish, no rehearsed cuteness, no stiff child actor delivery. She talked like an actual kid. She reacted like an actual kid. In a business full of little performers who'd been coached within an inch of their lives, Christy stood out because she was gloriously uncoached. Directors fell in love with her instantly because she never looked like she was performing. She simply existed in the moment, and that pure natural quality became the foundation for the role that would change her life forever. That role arrived with the groundbreaking television drama Family. Christy was cast as Letitia Buddy Lawrence, the youngest daughter in a messy, deeply human American family. The part demanded an almost impossible level of emotional truth from a girl who was barely 13 years old. But Christy delivered performances that left grown, experienced actors speechless. She didn't play Buddy as some sweet, wide-eyed teen stereotype. She gave her layers upon layers: doubt, wonder, jealousy, hope, terror, and that painful half-knowledge of adulthood every teenager carries like a secret wound. Audiences felt her in their bones. There was something fearless about the way she dove into the ugliest, most vulnerable emotions. She cried real tears on camera without shame. She let herself look furious, lost, mortified, completely overwhelmed. She took feelings teenagers usually stuff down deep and dragged them into the light for everyone to see. People saw themselves in her, and critics saw genius. The awards came fast and hard. Christy won her first Emmy, while most kids her age were still struggling with fractions. Then she won another. The trophies didn't make her arrogant. They simply confirmed what everyone already sensed. She was one of the most gifted young performers America had ever produced. On Family, she became the beating, emotional heart of the entire series. Even in scenes she wasn't in, you could feel her influence shaping everything. It was extraordinarily rare for a teenager to become the moral and emotional center of a primetime drama. But Christy did it effortlessly, just by being unflinchingly honest. That honesty, however, came at a price most child stars are never properly shielded from. Christy rocketed to fame with zero privacy, zero breathing room, and zero gradual easing into what it means to be a household name before you're old enough to drive. Endless interviews, crushing public expectations, constant judgment of every haircut and outfit, plus a filming schedule that would break most adults. All of it landed on the shoulders of a girl still trying to figure out who she was when the cameras weren't rolling. Her mom did everything she could to protect her. Her brother Jimmy often played Big Brother bodyguard. But fame is a freight train, and it wasn't slowing down for anybody, least of all Christy McNicholas. By the time Family had turned her into a national treasure, movie producers were already circling, dreaming of what she could do on the big screen. Her talent was undeniable, and Hollywood was starving for young stars who could pull in both teenagers and their parents. Whenever her television schedule allowed even the tiniest gap, Christy started making movies, and she brought that same unforced, heartbreaking realism with her. Her first major film triumph was Little Darlings, a raw coming-of-age story that put her opposite another teen phenom, Tatum O'Neal. The plot, two girls at summer camp making a reckless bet about losing their virginity, was controversial enough to grab headlines on its own. But it was Christy who gave the movie its soul. Critics raved about how honest, how fragile, how painfully real her performance felt. She played a tough-talking girl hiding loneliness behind sarcasm and bravado, and every tiny detail, a shaky voice, a forced laugh, a sudden crack in the armor, felt lived in. Then came Only When I Laugh, where she held her own opposite heavyweights like Marsha Mason, playing a wounded teen trying to reconnect with her alcoholic mother. Once again, she was handed the emotional center of an adult drama, and once again she crushed it, earning a Golden Globe nomination and proving she could do comedy, tragedy, or anything in between. But the higher you climb in Hollywood as a young performer, the harder the unseen toll usually is. Behind the glowing reviews and magazine covers, Christy was starting to crack. The workload that had felt normal when she was 9 or 10 became crushing once she hit her teens. She was a fierce perfectionist who poured her whole soul into every role, and that kind of giving takes something out of you that you can't always get back. On movie sets far from home, she began having panic attacks, sleepless nights, waves of anxiety, and sudden plunges into sadness she didn't have words for yet. Co-stars noticed her mood swings. Directors saw the exhaustion in her eyes. But back then, the industry's attitude toward child actors was basically, keep smiling and keep working. Mental health wasn't something people talked about, especially not for kids expected to be grateful for their big break. So Christy did what she'd always done. She pushed the pain down, plastered on a smile, and powered through. Fame shadowed her every step. There was no safe corner where she could just be a normal teenager. Every time she thought about slowing down, another incredible script landed on her doorstep. Another huge opportunity appeared, and the machine roared louder. People closest to her started seeing warning signs. While shooting a film overseas, the pressure finally broke her completely. She suffered what she later called a total nervous breakdown, loneliness, terror, the suffocating weight of expectation, everything hit at once. She had to quit the movie and fly home, something almost unthinkable for a star of her magnitude. At the time, she didn't have a name for what was happening to her. No diagnosis. She just knew she felt like she was drowning as her teenage years faded. Christy found herself living two completely separate lives. There was the Christy the world adored, the radiant young actress who could carry an entire film on her slim shoulders. And then there was the private Christy, a young woman quietly wondering why all the success in the world still left her feeling hollow and terrified inside. That inner conflict bled into her work throughout the 1980s. On screen, she was still magnetic, still gave everything. Off-screen, the fractures were spreading. When the whirlwind of movie offers finally began to slow, Christy felt herself drawn back to the one place that had always felt like home: television. The rhythm was familiar, the schedule more predictable, no months-long location shoots halfway around the world. So when the creators of a new NBC sitcom came calling in the late 80s, she listened, first cautiously, then with a flicker of genuine excitement she hadn't felt in years. The show was Empty Nest, a spin-off from the Golden Girls universe. It followed a widowed pediatrician and his two grown daughters who'd moved back home. Christy was offered the role of Barbara Weston, the funny, slightly reckless cop daughter who brought heart and crackling energy to every scene. It was a huge shift from the troubled teens she'd played so often. Barbara was grown up, confident, quick-witted, grounded, yet still carried that unmistakable Christy spark, the warmth in her eyes, the total emotional honesty hiding behind every punchline. Viewers took to her instantly. For the first time in years, Christy felt something like stability. The weekly shooting schedule let her stay near family and real friends. The cast became a little family of their own. People on set described the atmosphere as relaxed, kind, almost healing. From the outside, it looked like she'd finally found the perfect spot, but no one watching at home could see the war still raging inside her. The anxiety, the mood swings, the crushing exhaustion that had haunted her since childhood hadn't gone away. If anything, they'd grown heavier with age. What started as teenage burnout had deepened into something darker, something she could no longer outrun with sheer willpower and a smile. Close friends noticed her pulling away, canceling plans, disappearing for days into silence. There was still almost no language around mental health in those days, especially in show business. Words like bipolar disorder were whispered, if they were said at all. Admitting you were struggling could kill a career overnight. So Christy kept hiding, kept enduring, kept performing through the pain. But inside, her emotional foundation was crumbling. She later said she could literally feel her stability slipping away, moods crashing without warning, energy vanishing for days at a time, racing thoughts at 3 a.m. followed by mornings where she could barely move. For the first time in her life, just push through it wasn't working anymore. The breaking point came in the early 1990s. After years of fighting in silence, Christy finally received the diagnosis that put a name to the storm she'd been living in for decades: bipolar disorder. Suddenly everything, the euphoric highs, the terrifying lows, the chaos she'd never understood, made sense. The diagnosis was both a relief and a death sentence for her acting career. It explained why the intense spotlight, the relentless schedules, and the constant public judgment were destroying her. Managing bipolar disorder requires calm, routine, privacy, and space to heal, none of which exist in Hollywood. In 1992, Christy made the hardest choice she'd ever faced. She walked away from Empty Nest mid-season, quietly announced she was leaving to take care of her health, and then, poof, disappeared. No magazine covers explaining why. No tearful Oprah interview. Just silence. Fans were stunned and heartbroken. Because mental health was still so stigmatized, most people never understood what she was really going through. But the few who knew her best called it the bravest thing she'd ever done. Choosing survival over fame when fame was the only life she'd ever known. She did return once more, in 1995, to film the series finale, a quiet thank you to the show that had given her so much. Everyone who worked with her that week said she seemed softer, calmer, carrying the weight of everything she'd survived. It felt less like a guest appearance and more like a gentle goodbye to acting itself. After that, Christy did something almost no star of her level has ever had the guts to do. She walked away completely and never looked back. No comeback attempts. No nostalgia tours. No clinging to past glory. She chose ordinary life, and in Hollywood terms, that was downright revolutionary. Through the late 90s, she eased back into the industry only in the tiniest, safest ways. Voice work on animated shows like Extreme Ghostbusters and Invasion America. She could show up in jeans and no makeup, record her lines, and go home. No paparazzi, no pressure to look perfect, no emotional exposure. It was peaceful, controlled, hers. But even that started feeling like a tether to a world she needed to be free of. So in 2001, at the age of 39, Christy McNicholas officially retired from acting forever. Her statement was short, graceful, and devastatingly honest. She was done pretending to be other people. Now she wanted to spend the rest of her life learning who she actually was. Fans read those words and felt their hearts crack open. It was one of the most beautiful goodbyes anyone in Hollywood had ever given. She started teaching acting classes to kids, pouring all her knowledge and love into the next generation. She volunteered quietly, gave to causes she believed in without ever wanting credit, and slowly built the private, grounded life she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl running to auditions. For someone who'd spent almost her entire existence under bright lights, the silence must have felt like heaven. For years, she stayed almost completely out of the public eye. No red carpets. No "where are they now?" interviews. Just peace. Then, in 2012, she did something that stunned the world again, this time with pure joy. At 50 years old, Christy came out publicly as gay and introduced her longtime partner, Marty Allen. She didn't do it for attention or to launch a new chapter on screen. She did it for kids being bullied, for teenagers feeling alone and terrified, so they could look at her and see that survival, love, and happiness were possible. The response was an ocean of love. An entire generation that grew up crying with Buddy Lawrence now cried happy tears for the woman who'd played her. Today, Christy and Marty live a quiet, private life far from cameras, filled with stability, trust, and the kind of ordinary joy she once thought she'd never get to have. When she does speak about the past, there is no bitterness, only deep acceptance. She understands now that growing up famous made it nearly impossible to know her own heart, that staying closeted for so long added invisible weight to an already crushing load, and that leaving Hollywood saved her life. Her legacy is no longer just the unforgettable performances, the Emmys, the films that broke our hearts in the best way. Her legacy is courage. The courage to walk away. The courage to choose mental health over money and applause. The courage to come out on her own terms and tell kids it gets better. Christy McNicholas left Hollywood more than 30 years ago. And now, looking back, we finally understand why. She didn't leave because she stopped loving acting. She left because she started loving herself more. She left to heal. She left to live. And in doing so, she finally became free.